The views and opinions expressed on Real Talk with Horace Sheffield are not those of WADL TV 38 or Adele Broadcasting Corporation.
Giving you real talk, real talk, real talk. Take a walk down this path through Detroit, This is real talk, real talk, real talk. Real issues straight from the heart, Giving you real talk, real talk, real talk. Take a walk down this path through Detroit, This is real talk.
Welcome to another edition of Real Talk. I'm Reverend Sheffield, my capable co-host, David Felton, Wayne County Sheriff's Office, Vice President of the Detroit Association of the Black Organization. Of course, the voice that was known throughout Detroit on back-to-back of WQBH, award-winning show, and then, of course, American Black Journal, and that is Gerald Smith. Welcome, brothers.
Thank you.
Morning. We've got a great guest. Her name is Q English. She is the director of the faith-based, I'm not specific title, but she runs the faith-based enterprises at HHS for Secretary Becerra. She's out of New York. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. So glad to be on the show, Doctor.
Yeah, so you didn't just wake up and wind up in a quasi-cabinet position. I mean, you come from some kind of work, some kind of involvement, some kind of history. Give us some of your background.
Well, I actually came here being the Deputy Director of Faith-Based Initiatives for the Governor of New York at the time. And prior to that role is a similar role to what I'm doing here for the nation. Prior to that, I did a lot of work, grassroots work, on the ground work, working with those that are founded the first people of color-led organization and survivor-led organization combating human trafficking and domestic violence in New York. Did a lot of work with, those coming out of prison, young men and women on probation. And so that was really at the core of the type of work that I did in New York City. Really is just really about, if it pains the heart of God, it pains us, right? And so if there are any type of injustices, we sort of stood up to make sure we confronted it the best way we knew how. Coming from one of the poorest congressional districts in New York, the Bronx, you have to say the in front of Bronx, the Bronx. There was a lot of work to be done there. So we did a lot of work and the space in helping youth and developing programs and mentoring programs. My organization ended up being an organization led by previously incarcerated people, which was very effective. As you know, the whole Credible Messenger movement started in New York City, and being able to reduce recidivism and having a model organization that showed how it can be done. So that's the kind of work I did, and it really, Doctor, it really stemmed from, my own home life that really drove the passion to make sure that kids didn't end up the way a lot of our family members.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the PSA we have that deals with suiciding and, some of your revelations about things in your family. But Gerald, you have a question for Q?
Yeah, and it's...
by the way, it's Reverend Q.
Reverend Dr. Q.
Yeah.
Listen, so Reverend Doctor, how do we break this code of silence about, speaking about suicide? So many families and others that, refuse to talk about. All of us in some way, shape, or form have been directly impacted by this.
I think it's really about leading by example, right? You gotta create the platform. You've got to be the one to step out, particularly when it comes to our children. You gotta create that bare your chest moment to actually get them to, number one, trust you, right? And then secondly, once they trust you and that you're really in it for relationship purposes, then you can begin to talk about things that are hard. And I think what's been effective is really just talking about yourself, particularly as an adult, being vulnerable on some fronts of the things that have been challenging for you to create that opening. And I think, those that are influential, particularly those in the faith community, right? It's like, that's our knock. We're like the first door to be open to them because that's who they feel safe to talk about it. We have to use we got to use our pulpit, our platform to have those kind of honest discussions, and, yes, the Bible and verse, and then tying it into real real life stuff, right? These are things that we are suffering with. Creating the stats from the podium, the pulpit, don't hide it, don't make it a, Tuesday afternoon discussion, make it a Sunday morning discussion, make it a Friday evening discussion, create those safe places for them, right? Whether it's in their youth group, begin to have those discussions, may not call it mental health, maybe call it, how are you doing emotionally? Understand the nuances of language, right? And being sensitive in that regard too. So those are just some of the ways I can think of right off, the top of my head, but we have to start that conversation.
Yes. Brother David is the person who runs our project Rainbow, which is our suicide prevention project.
Okay.
Erica Alexander and others, we've done some great things. David, you have a question?
Yes, first of all, I love the fact that you are a preacher, and there's something about those women preachers from New York. I'm thinking about Cordelia Wallace and Jackie McCullough.
Oh, yeah.
Are very, 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 very nice to hear. Anyway, as it relates to even that being a female preacher and a female reverend, has there been any issues working in this area? Are you finding any obstacles, or are you receptive? It's kind of a rhetorical question. I know you're effective, but how does it affect you as a woman of God and a faith-based a preacher?
Well, I just think, my womanhood is power. I just really feel like, I don't think about closed doors. I think about the doors that God opens and me walking through it. And if someone closed it, then you're not assigned to my life. I don't create it. I don't see stop signs in God's will. It's like if he said that this is what I'm going to do, then to me, it's already done. So I'm just merely taking the steps to get there. I never, and this is how I've always been this way. It's like once I see it and I know it's him, then it's just a matter of time before it's done, right? And so I never look at my the fact that I'm a woman or he's a man and, this is a room for men or this is a room for women. It's a room for whoever God, opens the room for. And I just walk in in his authority, and then sometimes being a woman creates even more authority. I never think of less authority, depending on the setting. And, there's some things that we can relate to that, perhaps, men can when it comes to, talking to the daughters or talking to, the woman population. They may feel more safe in that regard. So for me, I just love just hearing what God has to say, moving on that, knowing that at the end of the day, it's a done deal. It's a done deal. And so once I see it completed, I just literally move as he instructs me to. And if I come up against roadblocks, then it just simply means that I need to go another direction. Not that it's not going to be done. It's just that he's got another plan for me.
That kind of reminds me of my dad said, about to take a break. We got her for a whole show. One time I was having trouble with some things at Roosevelt, and they were talking about my dad because he had got the first Black principal appointed, and the white teachers were in uproar. And when I didn't go to school the next day, he said, "What's wrong?" I told him, he said, "Son, only time you experience friction is if you're moving. And Q knows how to move in spite of friction." We'll be right back this talking with Q English, who is head of faith base at HHS under Secretary for Cyril. Be right back after this.
I'm Wayne County Treasurer Eric Sabri, encouraging all taxpayers to please take advantage of the several payment options available.
You can pay online by visiting the Wayne County Treasurer's Office website. Paying online is easy and convenient.
You can also download the mobile app and pay with your smartphone.
You can pay at one of 70 kiosks located throughout Wayne County.
And yes, you can always still send in your payments using the U.S. Postal Service.
If you have to visit our office in person, you must make an appointment by going to treasurer.waynecounty.com. It only takes a few minutes. Facial covering or mask is required and social distancing is observed. Your health and safety is very important to us. You can also email our office at taxinfo@waynecounty.com or call us at 313-224-5990.
Choose Healthy Life presents Hope and Healing for today's Black health crisis. featuring Erica Alexander, Reverend Horace Sheffield III, Reverend Dr. Calvin Butts, Deborah Fraser Howes, Dr. Reed Tuckson, Reverend Dr. Hugh English of HHS Office of Faith-Based Partnerships. Doctors in the Black Church unite to discuss obesity, high blood pressure, and suicide prevention in the Black community. Hope and healing for today's Black health crisis airs September 21st, 8:30 p.m.
The word trail is odd. It means following behind. But when you get on a trail, you're moving ahead. Ahead of your worries, ahead of life's dramas, ahead of noise and fuss and distraction. Good trails show you the way. The best trails show you our way. Your Huron-Clinton Metro Parks, where we've got 250 miles of trails just waiting to be discovered. They're your Metro Parks. Come out and see what you find.
What a fascinating conversation we're having with Reverend Q English. I knew from the instant that I met her that she was a mountain mover and an earth shaker. Joe, you have some more questions for her?
Yeah, and this cuts right to the chase, Reverend Doctor. How would the efficacy of this initiative be measured?
That's a very good question. I do know that, and you're talking about which initiative? You want to be clear on that?
Suicide prevention initiative.
As it relates to collecting data, that's what they do ongoingly for the federal piece, right? And so that's why the federal piece you're hearing about, the children topping, our Black children, our Black boys, for example, topping the charts, and suicide. And so they continue their metrics. I'm not involved in how they track that, but what we are involved in tracking is the actual testimonies. It's the actual testimonies that come from our stakeholders who tracks the treatments, it tracks the children that have suicidal ideations and what measurements they've taken, right? And so for us, if you really think about on the nation, the only way that we're going to know that we're making a major difference is when we see these numbers go down.
Sure. Got you. Okay.
David, you have a question for
Yeah,
Q?
and I think I'm following up too on what Dr. Q was saying. A lot of times we look for quantitative data, and I think in this case, we're going to have qualitative data as it relates to how our message is and how our impact is as it relates to suicide prevention. And that's what we've been doing at Project Rainbow, where we don't necessarily have the exact data on a macro level, but we know through qualitative efforts that we are having an impact on our community, and those that we do come in contact with and are able to touch to prevent them from contemplating suicide or have resources for those that are contemplating suicide. I don't know if that was a question. That was just more.
No, but I do want to piggyback. Yeah, just piggybacking on that. Another thing we're going to realize is we're going to hear more youth start talking about it. When we start seeing like a groundswell of youth and adults coming out, people of color on this issue, we know that we are being effective. So to your point.
And in the city of Detroit, the principal population that David and I have served, or the ones who've been most prevalent in attempting suicide, have been younger people. And I've tried with David to wrap my arms around how a young person could be at a point where they think there's nothing left. There's no hope. I mean, the worst thing that happened to me is I didn't go out with Halle Berry.
Halle Berry.
So, I mean, I just don't know what world they live in that this becomes such a viable option.
There were struggles before COVID, but after COVID, you're looking at the isolation, right? You're looking at the anxiety level that's been pent up. You're looking at the losses of loved ones. They lost parents. Our Black children lost parents and guardians, grandparents. The loss has been so intense. And because they didn't have an outlet before, this has just intensified what they're internalizing. And so that internalizing is creating these conversations that have been so destructive. They haven't known who to talk to, how, and they haven't had a door open for them to talk, right? Because the stigma didn't start with them, it started with us.
Yeah.
And so, as a result, that has created the increase of the suicides, unfortunately.
So there's a national number now. What's that number?
988. 988.
And I had the occasion to go to Washington with you for the launching of that. And here's a PSA that I want you to see that she's featured in and that I had the blessing to be a part of. Just look at it right now.
I grew up with one of the most horrific statements that can be made in anybody's household, and that was, what goes on in the house stays in the house. And for me, and as a Black family, that nearly destroyed us. And it wasn't long after that, my nephew, 14 years old, hung himself. Wasn't long after that when you found my brother pushing a shopping cart in the middle of the street. Yeah, he was that one.
I'm the father of a suicide victim. My daughter was my only child. She was my heart, and she took her life. If there had been a helpline in that hour of crisis, it could have made a difference.
I've personally had to receive mental health and assistance. I've had family members who've received mental health, who've thought about suicide.
The significant number of folks who are attempting suicide, who have suicided, are young people between the ages of 13 and 19.
I have a friend who was very spiritual, loved the Lord, and who took her life. And the biggest problem was at the funeral, all of us knew it, and no one could talk about it.
Growing up in a family of 15, I really do know what it means when individuals would say that what goes on in the home, stay in the home, because that's the way our parents really raised us.
Too many people are experiencing suicidal crisis or mental health related distress without the support and care they need. There is hope. The Lifeline works. It helps thousands of people overcome crisis situations every day. The 988 dialing code is just the first step towards strengthening and transforming crisis care in this country.
It serves as a universal entry point so that no matter where you live, you can reach a trained crisis counselor who can help.
988 offers 24/7 access to trained crisis counselors who can help people experiencing suicidal, substance abuse, and other mental health crises.
To reach the Lifeline, people can call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org.
988 is more than just an easy to remember number. It's a direct connection to compassionate, accessible care and support for anyone experiencing mental health related distress.
But we're at a moment in time now where we have to indeed break that cycle and be open to a number of things that are happening in our families, especially in the Black church.
You may be the person that stands between them and that ultimate irreversible decision.
Thank you for calling the Lifeline. How may I help you?
Wow, that's such a powerful PSA.
Yeah.
I will share this story with you to talk about how important education is and the fact that people don't know that suicide is real and preventable. I think David remembers we were doing something here one day. I don't know if he was here or not, now to think of it. And a young lady kept following me. And finally she came into my office out of the clear blue and told me she was thinking about killing herself and explained to me how she'd been embarrassed at her school and the whole school had, gotten a certain idea of some things that happened to her. And her father happened to be here. It was a church service. And, I talked with her, I called him in, and his reaction was he was mad at her for having shared that with us. And he was a member of one of my friends who's part of Choose Other Life Churches. And then he called this pastor and took her over there to 1:30 in the morning, chastised him, because I was trying to explain to the pastor that she needed some professional help and blah, blah, blah. The young lady killed herself the next day. And it was just so heart-wrenching for me, because here I'm trained in QPR. I'm figuring by involving the parent, which I had a responsibility to do, that he would embrace the scientific methodology, but instead he was mad that she had shared it and then took her to the pastor to further condone it and criticize her.
That is one of the most horrific stories I've heard, and sad because it was preventable.
Yes.
And that, Dr. Sheffield, speaks to the point of what goes on in the house stays in the house. You know, we looked at it as shame, but instead of looking at it as a shame, looking at it as an opportunity to get our children help and perhaps to get yourself help. Right. Perhaps that shame caused you not to get help. And what you saw in your child, you actually saw in yourself and you didn't reach. And that's why some things have to come out of the house. When the things did not come out of the house, as you saw in the PSA, I had the substance use disorders. You know, we topped the charts on ACEs, adverse childhood events. We had the suicides, we had the, promiscuity, we had the domestic violence, we had all of that, but it was never.
And don't forget incest.
And incest ran rampant in our Black families. And those are the things that stayed in the house. And and some things never came out of the house. And parents were still ashamed of even talking about it. But unless we talk about it, our children cannot get help unless we're at the forefront of opening our mouths and letting them talk. And the most effective means of communication is in our ability to listen. And we have to do a better job at listening, not listening so that you can give them an answer, but listening so that perhaps you don't have the answer. And perhaps you're the one to direct them to someone else that does. And so sometimes we just need to listen and not be the savior of the day, because we want them to keep coming back to us. We want them to keep coming back to us as parents. We want to hear from our children. And unless we give them that listening ear, they're going to go to somebody else or perhaps no one else. Because if you continue to perpetuate that shame, you can't heal what you perpetuate. And so if you continue to perpetuate that shame, there'll be no outlet for them. We need to give them an outlet, Dr.
Troy, I'm
Sheffield.
preparing you for Q English because she's going to be at my church soon. Have some kind of community, event that she can speak because she's potent, palatable, and powerful. David, you have a question?
I just want to just stay in that same vein as we're talking about the healing process for some of the families. Dr. English, with regard to bringing those issues out of the house, a lot of times we have people that rip off the Band-Aids off of some of these things, but they don't know how to actually provide the right resource. And so I think the actions of the gentleman with the daughter was really just ignorance. How do we properly educate our people about the stigma, then about resources, and then about steps on how to resolve some of those issues in the way that they can be healed and not further traumatized by those particular issues or concerns?
When I think about the work that you guys are doing, we need to have more of your work in our cities, in our neighborhoods. And we need to broadcast that it's being offered. And houses of worship need to promote your work. Not just your house of worship, but other houses of worship need to have resources readily available. When you walk in, like as if you're picking up a bulletin, pick up that resource guide. Pick up our substance use disorder toolkit that's readily available. Pick up our suicide prevention toolkit. We have to, particularly as houses of worship and organizations, have these resources readily available as we would anything else. These PSAs that we're creating, create more. Let it play during your announcement times. Let it ring, like put it on social media. Put it where they live so that they can see it over and over and over again. And let's stay vocal. Let's make so much noise around this issue until things have to change. But we need more of organizations such as yourself.
Gerald, you have the last question, my friend.
Yeah, and I don't mean to put this in reverse, but in context, Reverend Doctor, when did suicide become a problem in the Black community? It's always been associated with the white community. When did this become a problem?
I think, what exasperated it has definitely been COVID. It has definitely been COVID when you think about it, because one of the things in our research that has been done nationally, and you're definitely not going in reverse, what has been done nationally, what we realize is that we don't have enough culturally competent behavioral psychologists available to our children, period. We lack that across our nation and particularly in our communities. Secondly, with the loss of loved ones, just think about it. They lost the most amount of parents and guardians. Remember, we were topping the charts in COVID.
Right.
Exactly. And so that loss, there was no outlet for that. We were so busy taking care of the adults, we weren't paying attention to what was going on with the children. And if the stigma already existed, it existed with us. It existed with us. There was never an outlet for our children to really talk about it. So what have they done instead? They've been taking their lives. And you're right, it has never been a problem in our community, but now it is a major problem. And unless we get in front of it, it's just going to increase.
Yeah. And so we have two choices, and the one that Jesus chose was the latter. We'd either chase circumstances or change conditions. The disciples, who did sin? Jesus said neither, but that the works of God might be made manifest. I'm tired of folks trying to figure out how it happened and do nothing about what happened.
Yeah.
Dr. English, we're so glad to have you. This is powerful. I'm telling you, the reviews on this show are going to be outstanding.
Wow.
How can people reach HHS for resources?
Oh, thank you for asking that. Again, my name of our department is called the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and I'm at the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, which I have been honored to direct. If you want to reach us, please write us at partnerships at hhs.gov. That's partnerships at hhs.gov.
All right, everybody just get ready. Q is going to be in the Motor City.
I'm coming.
All right, Dave?
I'm coming. I got to be with my brother, Dr. Sheffield.
All right, thank you. We had another great show. We're going to have her back soon. And remember, never ask anyone to do for you what you're unwilling to do for yourself. Bye-bye.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Choose Healthy Life presents Hope and Healing for today's Black Health Crisis, featuring Erica Alexander, Reverend Horace Sheffield III, Reverend Dr. Calvin Butts, Deborah Frazier Howes, Dr. Reed Tuckson, Reverend Dr. Hugh English of HHS Office of Faith-Based Partnerships. Doctors in the Black Church unite to discuss obesity, high blood pressure, and suicide prevention in the Black community. Hope and Healing for today's Black Health Crisis airs September 21st, 8:30 p.m.
I'm Wayne County Treasurer Eric Sabri, encouraging all taxpayers to please take advantage of the several payment options available. If you have to visit our office in person, you must make an appointment by going to treasurer.waynecounty.com. It only takes a few minutes. Facial covering or mask is required and social distancing is observed. You can also email our office at taxinfo@waynecounty.com or call us at 313-224-5990.
Park, walk, shop, dine, and explore Livernois. Stop by this beautiful historic neighborhood located on Detroit's northwest side of the city from 6 Mile to 8 Mile.
The Word Network television special, Hope and Healing, airs September 21st, 8:30 p.m., featuring Reverend Al Sharpton, Erica Alexander, Reverend Horace Sheffield III, Reverend Dr. Calvin Butts, Deborah Frazier Howes, Dr. Reed Tuckson. Doctors in the Black Church unite to discuss obesity, high blood pressure, and suicide prevention in the Black community. The Word Network television special, Hope and Healing, September 21st, 8:30 p.m.
Detroit, this is real talk, real issues straight from the heart, giving you real talk, Take a walk down this path through Detroit, this is real talk, real talk.